When the human princess took the front line, hope returned to the army. Smoke still lingered in the air, carrying the acrid smell of burnt metal and scorched earth. Soldiers moved slowly through the ruins, their armor dented and weapons scratched. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the valley, a grim reminder that the war was far from over. Hope seemed a forgotten thing among them. The human princess stood atop a small hill at the rear of the army, her eyes scanning the chaotic scene below. Unlike the generals and commanders around her, she had not been dulled by endless meetings or hardened by routine orders. Her heart still beat fiercely with determination, but even she could feel the weight of despair settling over her people. Soldiers had begun to whisper about surrender. Rumors of betrayal spread like wildfire. Even seasoned veterans avoided eye contact, as if speaking to each other might remind them of the hopelessness that surrounded them. The princess was not a warrior in the traditional sense. She had been trained in diplomacy, strategy, and the arts of leadership. She had grown up in palaces and courts, not on bloodied fields of battle. Yet she had watched enough of this war to understand one undeniable truth. Courage could inspire more than any army of machines or soldiers ever could. And right now, courage was in short supply. Her advisors were clustered around a holographic display, debating the next move. Generals argued, their voices rising and falling in heated tones that were both passionate and frustrated. Retreat, regroup, or strike at a weak point in the alien forces. Each suggestion was met with counterarguments and doubts. No plan seemed certain and no choice promised safety. The princess listened quietly, feeling a mixture of frustration and resolve. She knew what she had to do. Remaining in the rear, issuing orders from a safe position, would not save her army. It would only prolong the sense of defeat. The soldiers needed a symbol, something tangible to remind them that victory was not beyond reach. And if she did not act, then hope would die completely. Her decision was made. She would leave the safety of the command post. She would go to the front line herself. Word of her plan spread quickly, first as whispers among the council, then as murmurs through the ranks. Many were shocked. They had never seen a princess on the battlefield, let alone leading troops into danger. Some thought it reckless. Others thought it foolish. But a few understood. They understood that the princess was not reckless, she was determined. And determination, they knew, could be contagious. Preparations were made quickly. The princess's armor was brought to her, light enough to allow speed and agility, yet strong enough to withstand direct attacks. It gleamed faintly under the rising sun, polished and engraved with symbols of her lineage. She tested the fit, moving her arms and legs, imagining herself moving through the chaos of battle. It felt strange at first, the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders as much as the metal on her body. But she welcomed it. As she prepared, soldiers began to gather near the edges of the camp. They came not to question her, but to watch, some with fear, others with admiration. They had spent months fearing the alien forces, wondering if they could survive even one more day. But seeing the princess step forward stirred something in them, a memory of why they had joined this fight in the first place. It was not just duty or orders. It was a desire to protect their home, their families, their humanity. A small group of trusted knights and elite soldiers were assigned to accompany her. They were skilled, brave, and loyal, each one knowing the risks but willing to follow her nonetheless. Their formation was tight, disciplined, and precise, a contrast to the chaos they were about to face. The princess led them to the edge of the camp, where the land fell away into the smoke-filled valley below. The first steps were the hardest. Every soldier in the front lines had felt the weight of fear at some point, and she was no exception. Her heart pounded in her chest, her fingers gripping the controls of her hoverbike as if it were a lifeline. But she forced herself to breathe steadily, to focus on the path ahead rather than the dangers surrounding her. This was not about recklessness. This was about leadership. Below, the battlefield was a twisted maze of wreckage. Broken vehicles, scorched buildings, and craters filled with water from recent storms created a landscape that seemed impossible to cross. The alien forces were already entrenched, their towering machines patrolling the area, their weapons scanning for movement. But the princess refused to let fear dictate her actions. She guided her small unit down a narrow ravine, using the terrain as cover, each movement calculated, precise, and deliberate. As they advanced, they encountered their first patrol of alien scouts. The soldiers froze, readying their weapons. The princess acted quickly, signaling a flanking maneuver that took the aliens by surprise. In moments, the patrol was subdued and the humans pressed forward. It was a small victory, but it mattered. Every success, no matter how minor, sent a message. They could fight, and they could win. Word of her presence on the front lines spread like wildfire among the soldiers. When a soldier glimpsed the princess leading a small squad against the aliens, a cheer rose from those nearby. It was not just noise, it was hope, returning to hearts that had long been weighed down by despair. Slowly, hesitancy began to transform into courage. Units that had frozen in fear began moving again, inspired by the sight of their leader facing the same dangers they did. Despite the risks, the princess remained composed. She was not invincible, but she understood strategy, timing, and human ingenuity. She guided her troops through ambushes, helped them find cover, and coordinated their movements with calm authority. Each small success strengthened the bond between her and the soldiers, reinforcing the idea that leadership meant standing beside your people, not above them. As the sun climbed higher, the first full battle of the day began. Explosions shook the ground, and energy blasts streaked across the sky. The princess was in the thick of it, directing movements, aiding soldiers, and sometimes even engaging in combat herself. Her presence was a beacon, a reminder that courage was not a choice for the few but a responsibility for all. By midday, the small victories had begun to accumulate. The alien forces had underestimated the humans, expecting them to be disorganized and broken. But they were wrong. Led by the princess, the army moved with determination and precision. Ambushes turned into counterattacks, retreats became strategic repositioning, and morale began to climb. Soldiers shouted orders, cheered their successes, and moved with renewed confidence. The princess knew that this was only the beginning. The war was far from over and the enemy remained strong. Yet she also knew that hope had returned. It was fragile, like a delicate flame in the wind, but it burned nonetheless. And as long as it burned, there was a chance for victory. That night, as the battlefield quieted for a brief rest, soldiers gathered around small fires. They spoke not just of strategy and orders, but of the princess who had led them into danger. They shared stories of her bravery, her quick thinking, and her unwavering presence. In their hearts, a new determination grew. They would not surrender. They would fight, not just for themselves, but for the leader who had shown them what it meant to be truly human. The princess stood a short distance away, watching the stars emerge in the night sky. She knew the road ahead would be long and perilous, but she also knew that the first step had been taken. She had stepped forward when others hesitated, and in doing so, she had given her people something they had almost forgotten: hope. The first light of dawn barely touched the horizon when the princess and her small group of soldiers prepared to move again. The night had been quiet, but the quiet brought no comfort. She could hear the distant hum of alien machinery, the low thrum of engines patrolling the outskirts, and the occasional sharp crack of energy weapons. Every sound reminded her that the enemy had not forgotten them, and that today's fight would be harder than yesterday's. The soldiers gathered their gear and checked their weapons. The princess walked among them, nodding quietly to those she passed. Each soldier she met seemed to carry a mixture of fear and admiration in their eyes. Some had known her from before the war, had seen her in palaces or at formal events. Others had only heard her name spoken in whispered stories of courage. Now she was one of them, moving beside them through danger, leading not from a throne but from the trenches. The day's mission was clear. Reconnaissance had revealed that the alien forces were consolidating near a ridge that overlooked a vital supply route. If the aliens managed to hold the ridge, the human army's supply lines would be cut, and their chance of recovery would vanish. The princess had a plan. A small, fast-moving unit would approach the ridge from a hidden path known only to a few scouts. They would create a diversion and then strike the aliens before they could prepare. The journey to the ridge was tense. The terrain was rough, littered with debris from previous skirmishes. Craters pocked the earth, some still smoking from recent bombardments. Trees and rock formations had been shattered, leaving jagged obstacles that made movement slow and dangerous. Despite the difficulty, the princess led her group steadily. She did not rush, for she knew that haste could be fatal. Every step forward was measured, deliberate, and precise. As they advanced, small patrols of alien soldiers appeared, moving between the wreckage. The human soldiers froze, waiting for her signal. The princess raised her hand and nodded. They split into two groups, moving silently through the cover of rubble and smoke. One group approached from the left, while the princess led the other from the right. The alien patrol was caught completely off guard. In moments, the princess and her soldiers had disabled the patrol without a single casualty. The small victory boosted morale immediately. Soldiers whispered to each other, their voices barely audible over the wind, but the words were enough. "She's with us," they said. "If she can do it, we can do it." The princess did not need to speak. Her actions spoke louder than any words. Courage was contagious, and she could feel it spreading through her unit, fueling them for the challenges ahead. As they drew closer to the ridge, the landscape changed. The ground sloped sharply upward, and jagged rocks jutted out like teeth. The aliens had established defensive positions, energy barriers glinting in the sunlight and automated turrets scanning the area. A direct attack would have been suicide. The princess paused, scanning the defenses carefully. She remembered the lessons she had learned from studying strategy. Direct strength was not always the answer. Sometimes, patience and creativity were more powerful than weapons. She signaled her group to split again, moving into smaller, agile units that could move quickly and quietly. Using the rocks and ruined structures for cover, they advanced in a zigzag pattern, staying out of line with the alien sensors. The princess herself moved last, ensuring that she could support wherever the need was greatest. Her mind raced with calculations, timing, distance, enemy positions, all of it coming together in a careful plan she hoped would succeed. Suddenly, a distant alarm rang out. One of the alien patrols had spotted a soldier. Energy weapons began to sweep the area. The princess acted without hesitation. "Move to the left ridge," she shouted. "Use the rocks for cover, now." Her voice carried urgency and authority, and her soldiers obeyed instantly. They ducked behind jagged stones, rolling and sliding to avoid the laser fire that streaked past them. Despite the danger, the princess remained calm. She knew fear could paralyze her soldiers, confidence could free them. Once they reached cover, she quickly assessed the situation. The alien soldiers were moving toward them, but the princess had already spotted an opportunity. A narrow passage between two rocks led directly behind the enemy position. If she could get a small team through it, they could flank the aliens, creating confusion and opening a path for the rest of the army. She turned to a small squad of the fastest soldiers. "Follow me," she commanded. "We go through the gap. We strike hard and we strike fast." The squad moved swiftly, keeping low and silent. The passage was tight, forcing them to squeeze through in single file. Every movement was tense, every breath careful not to give away their position. The princess led from the front, her hand steady on the weapon she carried, eyes scanning constantly for danger. When they emerged on the other side, the alien soldiers were surprised, their formation broken. The attack was swift and precise. The squad disabled the nearest turrets, and the princess herself neutralized an alien commander using a combination of skill and quick thinking. She did not act recklessly. Every move was calculated. The enemy was powerful, but human ingenuity, courage, and determination proved stronger. Soldiers who had been hesitant moments before now advanced with confidence, inspired by the princess's example. By midday, the ridge was partially under human control. The alien forces, caught off guard by the speed and precision of the attack, began to falter. Energy barriers flickered as soldiers disabled the generators powering them. The princess moved constantly, supporting where needed, encouraging her soldiers and reinforcing the strategy that had begun to succeed. The morale of the army surged. Soldiers who had feared defeat now felt hope again, a tangible, burning hope that gave them strength to fight. The princess took a brief moment to survey the battlefield. The sun was high now, casting sharp shadows across the ridge. She could see the alien forces regrouping, attempting to mount a counterattack, but she was ready. Using signals and hand gestures, she coordinated movements across the ridge. Soldiers shifted positions, laid traps, and prepared for the enemy's return. She had taught them not only to fight but to think, to anticipate, and to use the environment to their advantage. When the alien forces struck again, they found a very different human army waiting for them. Ambushes, traps, and clever positioning made the assault much more difficult than expected. Every soldier fought with renewed determination, inspired by the princess's presence and leadership. The battle was intense, but the humans held their ground. They were no longer just soldiers. They were a force united by courage and hope. By late afternoon, the ridge was firmly under human control. The alien forces, unable to break through and suffering heavy losses, retreated to regroup. The princess allowed herself a brief smile. Victory was not total, and the war was far from over, but today had proven something vital. Human courage and ingenuity could challenge even the most powerful enemy. Soldiers cheered her name, their voices echoing across the ridge, not as a cry for a distant monarch, but as genuine gratitude for a leader who had fought alongside them. As the soldiers rested, tending to their wounded and securing the area, the princess walked among them. She spoke quietly with those who had fought bravely, offering encouragement and guidance. Her presence was not a symbol of authority alone. It was a reminder that leadership meant standing beside her people, sharing their hardships, and inspiring them through action. Night fell over the battlefield and fires burned across the ridge. The princess stood on a high rock, looking out over the valley. The alien forces were retreating, but the cost had been high. She knew the coming days would bring more challenges, more battles, and more risks. Yet she also knew something precious had returned to her army: hope. It was fragile, yes, but alive. And as long as it burned, there was a chance for victory, a chance for humanity to prevail. The princess remained awake long after most of her soldiers had rested. She reviewed the day's events in her mind, thinking through successes, mistakes, and what could come next. Every decision had mattered. Every action had consequences. She knew that the next battle would test her leadership even further. But for now, she allowed herself a small moment of pride. She had taken the front line. She had faced danger. And she had reminded her people why they fought, and why they could win. The morning mist hung low over the battlefield, softening the jagged outlines of ruined buildings and shattered vehicles. The human princess stood atop the ridge she and her soldiers had claimed the previous day. She watched the valley below, where the alien forces were gathering once more. Their movements were deliberate, methodical, and terrifying. This time, it was clear they had brought their elite units, heavily armored machines that had already crushed other human armies in past battles. Her soldiers were tense. They had fought bravely yesterday, but the thought of facing these elite units caused hesitation to return. Many glanced at the princess, seeking reassurance. She did not speak immediately. She only looked at the valley, analyzing the enemy's formations, studying the terrain, and calculating every possibility. Then, turning to her unit, she spoke quietly but firmly. "We have faced danger before," she said. "We have faced fear. We have won when no one believed we could. Today will be no different. Stay sharp. Move wisely, trust each other, and trust yourselves." Her words were simple, but they carried power. Soldiers straightened their backs, squared their shoulders, and readied their weapons. The princess could see the courage returning in their eyes. Hope, fragile and flickering, had been strengthened once again. The elite alien units advanced, their massive forms moving with uncanny precision. Their weapons hummed as energy shields activated, reflecting sunlight in a dazzling display. The humans watched in awe and apprehension. Many thought these machines were unstoppable. But the princess had learned long ago that no enemy is invincible, not when humans can adapt, think, and act with courage. She signaled her units to spread out across the ridge, taking positions behind rocks, rubble, and ruined walls. Her strategy relied not on direct confrontation but on ingenuity. The humans would use the terrain to their advantage, creating traps and ambush points, forcing the aliens to overextend themselves and leave weaknesses in their formation. Every soldier understood their role. Every soldier understood that today, their lives and their people's future depended on their skill, discipline, and unity. The first wave of elite units approached the ridge. Their footsteps shook the ground, their weapons raised, scanning for any sign of movement. The princess waited, her eyes fixed on the machines, calculating the right moment to strike. Then, with a swift hand signal, the humans sprang into action. Energy nets, traps, and carefully placed explosives went off simultaneously. The elite units staggered, momentarily disoriented by the unexpected attack. The soldiers surged forward, pressing their advantage. The princess herself led a small flanking squad, moving around the enemy's left side. Her weapon discharged precise shots, targeting critical points on the alien machines. Each strike required careful timing and aim, exploiting weak points she had identified in their design. Her squad followed her lead, moving with coordination and speed that even the aliens had not anticipated. Despite the humans' success, the battle was far from easy. The aliens adapted quickly, sending reinforcements to support their elite units. Explosions shook the ground, energy beams cut through the air, and debris rained down from damaged machines. Some human soldiers were knocked down or injured, but they rose again, driven by the example set by the princess. She moved tirelessly among them, encouraging, guiding, and fighting alongside them. The turning point came when she spotted the leader of the elite alien squad, a towering machine with advanced weaponry and shields. It was the heart of their formation, and if it was destroyed or disabled, the alien forces would lose coordination. She quickly devised a plan. Using her knowledge of terrain, she led her squad in a risky maneuver, drawing the elite leader into a narrow canyon where its size and weight became a disadvantage. The alien machine followed, unaware of the trap awaiting it. The princess's squad sprang into action. Explosives, carefully placed along the canyon walls, detonated simultaneously, sending debris crashing down onto the enemy. The elite machine staggered, its shields flickering under the impact. Seizing the moment, the princess climbed onto a large rock, targeting the exposed energy core of the machine. With precise aim, she fired her weapon. A brilliant flash illuminated the canyon as the core was struck. The machine shuddered violently and fell, sending tremors through the ground. The destruction of the elite leader sent shockwaves through the alien ranks. Confusion spread among their forces, and their advance faltered. The humans seized the opportunity, pressing their attack with renewed vigor. Soldiers who had feared the elite units now fought with confidence, inspired by the princess's courage and ingenuity. Every strike, every movement, every decision was guided by her example. Despite the victory, the princess knew the battle was not yet over. More alien reinforcements were on the way, and the terrain was treacherous. She moved among her soldiers, reinforcing positions, coordinating movements, and planning for the next phase of the fight. Her presence was a constant source of inspiration. Soldiers shouted her name, not as a distant ruler, but as a leader who had shared their dangers, their fears, and their triumphs. The battle continued through the day. The humans used every advantage they had, terrain, traps, and human ingenuity, to hold their positions and repel the alien forces. The princess herself was constantly in motion, directing, supporting, and engaging when necessary. Her energy never faltered and her determination never wavered. She had become more than a symbol. She was a living embodiment of hope, courage, and human resilience. By late afternoon, the alien forces began to retreat. Their elite units were damaged, their formations broken, and their confidence shaken. The humans, led by the princess, held the ridge with strength and determination. The victory was not complete, but it was significant. It proved that even the most advanced enemy could be challenged by courage, strategy, and the indomitable human spirit. As the battlefield quieted, soldiers tended to their wounded and secured their positions. The princess moved among them, speaking quietly to those who had fought bravely, offering encouragement, guidance, and gratitude. Her presence reassured them that their efforts mattered, that their courage had made a difference, and that the future, though uncertain, was still worth fighting for. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley. Fires burned in the distance, marking the positions of the enemy retreat and human advances. The princess stood on a high rock, surveying the battlefield. The cost had been high, but the lesson was clear. Human courage, ingenuity, and unity could overcome even the most formidable obstacles. That night, as the army settled in for a brief rest, soldiers gathered around small fires, sharing stories of the day's battles. They spoke of the princess's bravery, her quick thinking, and her tireless leadership. In their eyes, she was no longer just a royal figure. She was a leader who had fought beside them, faced danger with them, and inspired them to be their best. The princess herself remained awake, reviewing the day's events in her mind. She thought about what had succeeded, what could be improved, and what challenges lay ahead. She knew the next battle would be even more difficult. The aliens would learn from today, adapt their strategies, and return stronger. But she also knew that her army had grown stronger. They had faced elite units and survived. They had witnessed courage in action. And they had found hope again, a powerful weapon that no alien technology could destroy. As the stars appeared in the night sky, the princess allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. She thought about her people, her soldiers, and the path that lay ahead. She knew the road to victory was long and dangerous, but she also knew that she would not face it alone. The army, inspired by her leadership and courage, was ready to follow her wherever she led. The next morning, preparations began again. Supplies were checked, weapons repaired, and strategies discussed. The princess walked among her soldiers, observing, listening, and offering guidance. Her presence was steadying, her words encouraging, her actions inspiring. Every soldier knew that they were part of something greater than themselves, something worth fighting for, the survival and triumph of humanity. As the alien forces regrouped and prepared for another assault, the princess and her army stood ready. They were no longer a group of frightened soldiers clinging to hope. They were a unified force, guided by courage, strategy, and the indomitable spirit of humanity. The princess had taken the front line, faced the enemy's elite, and emerged victorious. Her example had transformed fear into determination, hesitation into action, and despair into hope. The battle was not yet over, but the tide had begun to turn. The humans had proven that they could fight, adapt, and win. And at the center of it all, standing firm against the chaos of war, was the human princess, a living symbol of courage, leadership, and hope. The morning air was crisp and sharp, carrying the faint smell of smoke from the previous day's battles. The valley below had quieted, but the silence was temporary. The alien forces were regrouping, stronger and more determined than before. Their movements were careful, deliberate, almost surgical, as if they had learned from their previous mistakes. The princess knew that today would decide much more than a single ridge or a single supply route. It could determine the fate of the entire campaign. Her soldiers moved with quiet determination, gathering equipment, checking weapons, and reviewing plans. The princess walked among them, observing, encouraging, and answering questions. Though she was a princess, her presence was not distant or ceremonial. She moved as one of them, sharing their fears and their hopes. Each nod, each word, each gesture reminded them why they fought and who they fought for. The plan for the day was ambitious. The human forces would push forward in a coordinated strike, aiming to reclaim territory lost in earlier battles and to disrupt the enemy's supply and communication lines. The princess's strategy relied on speed, ingenuity, and adaptability. She would lead the first wave, guiding her soldiers through dangerous terrain and ensuring that every move maximized their advantage. As dawn broke, the army began to advance. Dust and smoke from the previous day's fighting hung low over the valley, making visibility difficult. The alien forces were waiting, their advanced weapons scanning for movement. Yet the princess moved steadily forward, her eyes scanning the battlefield, her mind calculating every possibility. She was calm, focused, and determined, qualities that radiated through her troops and strengthened their resolve. The first encounter came quickly. A squad of alien patrols moved across the plain, weapons raised. The princess signaled her soldiers to spread out, using cover and shadows to approach undetected. With precise coordination, they struck, disabling the patrol and sending a clear message to the enemy. The humans were not the same frightened soldiers they had faced before. Encouraged by their success, the army pressed forward. The princess led her unit across a series of craters and ruined structures, using the terrain to shield their movements. Small squads of soldiers moved ahead to disable enemy observation points, while others set traps to disrupt advancing alien units. Every movement was calculated, every action purposeful. Soldiers who had doubted themselves yesterday now moved with confidence, their morale bolstered by the princess's courage and leadership. The alien forces responded with surprising speed. Machines and troops emerged from hidden positions, firing energy weapons that lit up the valley. Explosions shook the ground, throwing debris and dust into the air. Yet the humans did not falter. They moved with coordination, using cover, traps, and tactics that the enemy had not anticipated. The princess remained at the front, directing movements, supporting soldiers, and taking action wherever the battle demanded. At one point, a heavily armored alien walker approached, its shields glowing brightly and its weapons scanning for targets. The humans hesitated for only a moment before the princess acted. She spotted a weak point near the walker's base and led a small team in a daring flanking maneuver. Using explosives and precise fire, they disabled the walker's mobility and neutralized its threat. The soldiers cheered, their confidence growing with every victory. By midday, the battle had shifted in favor of the humans. The alien forces, surprised by the humans' ingenuity and determination, began to fall back. Yet the princess knew that the fight was far from over. More enemy reinforcements were on the way, and their elite units would soon return to challenge them. She coordinated with her commanders, establishing positions that could hold against another assault while preparing for the next wave of attacks. In the afternoon, the alien elite returned. These were the most powerful machines and soldiers, equipped with advanced technology and weapons capable of overwhelming ordinary forces. Many soldiers looked at them with fear, but the princess stood firm. She had faced these units before and knew that with strategy, courage, and coordination, even the most formidable enemy could be challenged. She divided her forces into multiple squads, assigning each a specific role. Some would draw the elite units into traps, others would attack from unexpected angles, and a select few, including herself, would focus on targeting critical points in the enemy formation. Every soldier knew their part, and every soldier understood that their unity and courage were as important as their weapons. The battle was fierce. Explosions tore through the landscape, energy weapons illuminated the sky, and the ground shook under the weight of the alien machines. The humans moved with precision, using every advantage they had. The princess fought alongside them, directing movements, providing support, and taking calculated risks. Her presence inspired those around her, turning fear into determination, hesitation into action. At one critical moment, an alien unit managed to breach the human lines, threatening to divide the army and create chaos. The princess acted instantly. She rallied nearby soldiers, organized a counterattack, and personally engaged the enemy. Using a combination of speed, strategy, and skill, she neutralized the immediate threat and restored order to the battlefield. Soldiers who had feared the breach now moved forward with renewed confidence, inspired by her courage and quick thinking. The tide of the battle began to turn. Alien forces, though powerful, were being outmaneuvered and disrupted. The humans exploited every weakness, turning the enemy's strength into a liability. Small squads executed flanking maneuvers, traps slowed the enemy's advance, and coordinated strikes struck at key targets. Every victory, no matter how small, strengthened morale and reinforced the belief that humanity could overcome even the greatest challenges. As the sun began to set, the princess led the final push. The remaining alien forces were concentrated in a narrow valley, vulnerable to concentrated attacks. Using signals and hand gestures, she coordinated movements across multiple squads. Explosives, energy weapons, and precision strikes combined to overwhelm the enemy. One by one, the alien units fell or were forced to retreat, leaving the humans in control of the valley. The victory was hard-earned and costly, but it was decisive. Soldiers cheered, embracing each other and celebrating their triumph. The princess moved among them, offering praise, encouragement, and gratitude. Her presence was not ceremonial. It was personal, genuine, and deeply felt. She had led them through danger, shared their fears, and inspired their courage. They had fought not just for survival, but for each other and for humanity itself. That night, the battlefield was quiet except for the sounds of tending to the wounded and securing positions. Fires burned across the valley, illuminating the faces of exhausted but triumphant soldiers. The princess stood on a high rock, looking out over the land. The enemy had been pushed back, key territory reclaimed, and her army's morale was stronger than ever. She allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The journey was far from over, but the first major victory had been won, and hope now burned brightly in the hearts of her soldiers. In the following days, the army worked to consolidate its gains. Supplies were moved, defenses strengthened, and injured soldiers cared for. The princess continued to lead from the front, observing, encouraging, and guiding her forces. Every day brought new challenges, but the morale, courage, and unity of the human soldiers ensured that they met each obstacle with determination. Stories of the princess's leadership spread across the army. Soldiers spoke of her bravery, her quick thinking, and her unwavering commitment. They told how she had faced elite units, neutralized threats, and inspired them to fight when hope seemed lost. Her actions became a symbol of what humanity could achieve when courage, strategy, and unity were combined. The princess herself remained humble. She knew that the victory belonged to her soldiers as much as to her. Without their courage, determination, and loyalty, the battles would have been lost. She continued to share in their struggles, fight alongside them, and ensure that their voices were heard in every decision. Weeks later, as the human forces regained strength and territory, the princess reflected on the journey so far. She thought about the soldiers who had doubted themselves, the elite enemy units that had challenged them, and the victories that had inspired hope. She realized that leadership was not about titles or positions. It was about action, example, and the willingness to face danger alongside those you lead. The war was far from over. The alien forces would regroup, adapt, and return with new strategies. But the humans had learned a valuable lesson. They could fight, adapt, and win. Courage, ingenuity, and unity were their greatest weapons, and at the center of it all was the princess, who had taken the front line, shared their struggles, and returned hope to the army. The final scenes of the campaign were not filled with fanfare or ceremony. They were filled with quiet moments of reflection, camaraderie, and gratitude. Soldiers shared stories, healed from their wounds, and prepared for the challenges ahead. The princess walked among them, listening, encouraging, and inspiring. She had proven that humanity could face even the most powerful enemies and emerge stronger. And as the sun set over the reclaimed valleys, casting long shadows across the battlefield, the human princess stood tall. Her armor was battered, her body tired, but her spirit remained unbroken. She had led her people through fear, danger, and despair. She had faced the enemy's elite, turned the tide of battle, and restored hope to an army that had almost lost it. Humanity had fought bravely, and under the guidance of their princess, they had learned that courage, unity, and determination could overcome even the greatest obstacles. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, hope burned brightly across the battlefield, illuminating the path forward for all who fought for freedom, survival, and the triumph of the human spirit. The princess looked to the stars above, knowing that the challenges ahead would be great, but so too would the strength of those who had learned to fight not just with weapons, but with hope, courage, and heart. She had taken the front line. She had inspired her people. And she had proven that when humanity stood together, nothing, not even the most powerful enemy, could extinguish their spirit. When the human princess took the front line, hope returned to the army.